any further ado, I'd like to introduce to you the soloists of the Rigid Containers brass group, the euphonium teacher at the Birmingham Conservatory and also the Royal Academy in London, Mr. Stephen Mead.
Well, thank you, John, for your very warm words of introduction. It's great to be here. I must admit, it's a little daunting because I often do concerts. I've even done unaccompanied sort of recitals in the past, but to do it in front of 100 or so experts really makes you wake up in the morning and think, I've got a job to do today. It's, you're going to keep me on my toes. What I intend to do really is to play for you this morning and talk and explain what it is I'm doing or what I'm trying to do. Introduce maybe one or two new pieces to you. But essentially what I'd like to do is to entertain you with things that I do, with the sound of the euphonium, and just perhaps give you a perspective from over the water on how we try and play the euphonium in the UK, that is, if I am representative. Just a very, very quick biographical note. I was born on the south coast of England, in a town called Bournemouth. It's very well known as the seaside town. Not really much happening brass band-wise, but it has a very famous symphony orchestra, the Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra, and also the Sinfonietta. I started playing a brass instrument when I was about 6. I moved on to the euphonium when I was about 10, within the ranks of the Salvation Army, in fact. I went to Bristol University and studied for a Bachelor of Arts in Music with the composer Derek Bourgeois. He was my main tutor for a couple of years. And it was he really who encouraged me to try and see through what I felt about doing with the euphonium. Because there were a lot of people that said, you really should play the trombone and earn some money and things like that. And I said, well, I'll just be a poor, happy young euphonium player, eventually an old euphonium player. And I've never had any regrets, certainly not musically. Because the more I've discovered about the instrument and the more I discover the communicating power of this instrument, the more I'm so glad that Derek Bourgeois was right, and I really had to see it through, which is expression. I then moved to the Midlands, where I joined the Desford Colliery Band, who I had 6 happy years with, perhaps the top brass band in the country, for quite a few years, and taught at a high school, and then in recent years I've been asked to teach at Birmingham and at London, as well as sort of like expand on the solo activities which I do. So it's a very exciting time. I'm particularly pleased to be here because it's a place where brass players for generations have looked to America for the fine orchestras and for the fine traditions. And to actually come here and make friends, and I mean that sincerely, friends with some of the top players in the business is really great. And to come here and try and do my thing, it puts, I feel, a lot of responsibility on my shoulders. It's weighed me down, that's why I'm so short. But anyway, I'm going to do my best to interest you this morning. That's probably the longest single bit of chat that you're going to get. I want to play, because really that's probably why you're here. You've heard lots of talks before, lots of people sort of imparting their wisdom to you. Essentially, I'd like to leave you with the sound. So that's how I'm going to start. I'm not going to start by leaving you. I'm going to start by playing just a little tune, first of all. A tune that I like very much, and I often start unaccompanied things with it. It's called Estrelita. I'm sure a lot of you know it. I was kind of expecting that I'd be talking to quite a few experts, so rather than sort of ramble haphazardly, as I tend to do sometimes, left to my own devices, I've actually planned out a few headings in which I was going to talk under, and I'll just tell you what those 6 headings are. And don't worry, we're not going to be here all day, but I thought I'd just let you know the sort of things that I want to touch upon. The first one I've called the psychological approach to performance. Because unless you've got yourself reasonably keyed up to do what you're going to do, and if I hadn't now, I'd have walked out here, looked at you and walked back out again. So the fact that I'm still here means that I feel reasonably happy with what I'm going to try and do. The second thing I've written down is called daily targets, because as a teacher I have to try and instill upon pupils the need to set out their stall, what they're going to do, why they're going to do it, and how they're going to do it. And of course I have to do that as well. Practice cannot be a random haphazard business, because unless you know what you're going to centre upon, then you may become good, you may not, you may be just doing the wrong things. So daily targets is the second one. The third one is called, is there anybody there? Because very often performers spend a lot of time sitting in a practice room, looking at 4 walls, getting sometimes very depressed, and we forget about what the purpose of what we do is. Is there anybody there? What am I doing, and for whom? The fourth one is called communicating through hollow tubes, which is really just an attempt to justify why this instrument, why the tuba, why the fascination for me with this, why not the piano? I mean, if you'd heard me play the piano, you'll know the answer to that. What is so special about the communicating power of a euphonium? The fifth one, and we're getting near the end in terms of this bit, is called technique is all very well. Technique can only take you so far. And then we have to reach out, as all performing musicians do, to grasp that extra thing which is going to help people to appreciate what we do and get something from it. We start going into an area of very nebulous terms, but it's important that you communicate something more than technique. Technique can be extremely boring. And the sixth one, which I won't explain yet, is actually called Back to the Future, which I used to know as a film, still do, but it's got an important sort of like sting in the tail. So that was Estrelita. It's a lovely tune. It's helped me just to get used to this acoustic. It's actually rather nice to play it. If I close my eyes, it's not because I'm trying to pretend you're not there. It's these lights are just a little bit strong at times. They're nice and warm. It's okay. Don't turn them off, John. So, the psychological approach to playing. I suppose, in a nutshell, what I'm going to say is that the more experience you get as a performer, the more you realise that there's less physically to do with playing well than there is mentally. So long as you can set yourself daily targets and stretch yourself from an early age. Playing becomes very much what happens in here in terms of whether you can communicate what you've done in the practice room. Because anyone that's played under pressure, as brass bands in England tend to do, this is one of the key things, we tend to be constantly competing against each other. And one of the great things about TUBA in this country is that everybody gets on with each other, and it's wonderful, and I wish I could, well, I'm going to try and take some of it back. But until the next band contest, where every band arrives in its bus and plays as well as it can, and then if they don't win, everyone else is a liar and a cheat. It's actually very difficult to actually create this sort of a brotherhood when you're continually pitting yourself against other people musically. So perhaps brass bands, whilst there's a lot of good things about them, they've got to reassess that side of it maybe. Essentially what you have to be is your own music teacher. As a performer, you have to be your own teacher, your own musical doctor who can advise you on all the different muscles that you use. You have to be your own agent to actually tell you whether you're going in the right direction to be able to sustain what you're doing. Your own bank manager, and also your own wife. Now, isn't that a strange thing to talk about? Somebody that doesn't mind telling you that really that's not very good. Take you to one side. I heard you practicing that. You're rushing it. It sounds terrible. You need to be able to do that yourself. You really shouldn't rely on other people doing it. So if you can sort of like building all those things. And essentially what I'm keen to do is always go in the right direction, playing wise. You need to know where you're going, you need to know what you're about. I'm now going to play you a theme and variation solo. I thought I'd get this out of the way early on because there's some really good stuff that I want to introduce to you. But all euphonium players will know the tradition, I'm sure, particularly in the UK, of the theme and variation solos, the sort of soapbox type solos where you stand up and perform, and you would hopefully impress people with your talent. And very often these pieces were a little thin on musical content, certainly on any sort of harmonic interest in the accompaniment. But they have served for generations it's true, they've served for generations to actually push players technically. And once the technical skills have been really ironed out and improved, then composers very often are drawn into writing for the instrument because of what they've heard. So I would like to play you now this little bit of flag waving, some variations on Rule Britannia by John Hartman, was the perpetrator of this musical crime. It starts with like a very short recitative, goes into an introduction, which many people who know it think that doesn't sound anything like Rule Britannia. They expect to hear the theme first. Well, they don't. They hear this first, then the theme, and then there are about 4 variations, which I shall try and play some. Bless you. Do I mind repeating it? Yes, indeed. Indeed I do. I'll take my jacket off if nobody minds. I've got a clean shirt. Well, that was Rule Britannia. It leaves you a little breathless because normally, of course, you have at least 8 bars in between variations in which to walk around and just relax. But the great thing about being slightly mad is that you push yourself to things that normally you don't have to do. And talking about the accompaniment, as you know, I'm from the brass band tradition. As I told you, I played initially with a Salvation Army band, and then I joined the Sun Life band. It was actually my first band, sponsored by the insurance company, insurance company, based in Bristol while I was at university, and then I moved to Desford. For me, there's something very special about the sound of the brass band. And I'm going to try, I can't really explain in words what it is. It's something about the mixture of brass sonorities, which some of you may have heard, some of you may not. Some of you may have heard a bad brass band, which may colour your judgment from now evermore. That's sometimes the case, just as people in the UK sometimes hear a very bad wind band. And I said, I'm going to America to play with a symphonic wind band. Really? Yes. And I wish, I could bring hundreds of skeptics over to here, and I wish I could take hundreds of skeptics here back to like the band contest in the UK, which is really quite an unforgettable experience. It comes back every year. It helps why I don't forget it. But I'm going to play you now just the first bit of on tape, because I don't have a band with me. The first bit of a second movement of The Call of the Seasons by Philip Catlanet, which is a piece which I know is known to a lot of players here. It's a lovely piece. In fact, it's only just been published in the UK. But you hear the sound of the euphonium against the sound of a very rich sonority of cornets playing low down, and the tubas and baritones and the tenor horns, trombos, all blending together. So just the first snatch to hear really the setting of the euphonium in the true, what I would hope is a true brass band sound. Some of the examples I'm going to play later on, you hear the sound of a brass band really at full belt, but there's something very special. And if you go away from the UK and sort of come back, it's one of those things, it's like sort of like brown bread and Yorkshire pudding and all these sort of things that people associate. It just somehow feels right. And I'd be very interested to see the progress of the brass band movement in this country, to see how quick it grows, whether it does grow. I sincerely hope it does. But in the UK, we have a similar situation with the wind bands. The wind bands are growing. The brass bands numerically are in decline, although the best bands seem to be getting better. We'll have to wait in 5 or 6 years to see how that works out. But, that's the second movement of The Call of the Seasons by Philip Catlanet. Daily targets. I don't want to spend too long on sort of boring you with how I practice, because I bore my neighbours stupid with very, very boring and menial exercises, so it seems. But I learned a long time ago that the best practice was not to get out your 10 favourite solos and just whiz them through. That is really quite pointless. You never whiz anything through. I mean, essentially what you have to do is concentrate on the basics. And I could just highlight them, because what you have to do is to rate yourself. As I say, you are your own music teacher. And you have to give yourself a current score rating as to how you're doing. And you can break that down into tone, flexibility, tonguing, breathing, fluency, range, ease of playing. So what I'm saying is really know your weaknesses. Show off your strengths, but know your weaknesses and make the weaknesses better. Because you can't hide anything as a solo performer. You can't kid an audience, because they will know, they will see through it. Did you notice he couldn't play soft? I sure did. Did you notice every time he went up to that top note, he squeezed the sound? Yep, I noticed. You cannot hide. And so maybe pick pieces that don't show off your weaknesses, but you cannot lie to an audience. And that's why setting yourself daily targets and continually trying to improve your playing in all areas I have some students that are very good players and they say, I can't double tongue. What do you mean you can't? I just can't. Won't do it. Period. Finish. Oh. Well, shall we try? No, I can't do it. And I do come up against barriers in players' minds, refusing to accept that there are areas that need to be worked on. And what I tend to do, I try to do, is sort of encourage students to do as well, is to rate themselves sort of out of 20. It sounds a very basic thing to do. But how is your breathing? Well, I guess it's only about 11. Okay. Then a few years' time, you hear them, and you say, wow, that's brilliant. How do you rate yourself now? And they say, 19. I say, yeah. But now it's out of 30. So, I mean, it is, if you like, a scale of progress. That is progress. The fact that you can go back and say, I'm now 17 out of 20 on my tonguing. I feel it's really getting quick. I can tongue 16th notes to beats of 120, 128 on the metronome. Very good. Now try 132. And the thing just sort of stops. So there are always barriers to be pushed back. And the interesting thing for me is that you never, ever will get a perfect performance of anything. Ever. It can be a bit disheartening, actually, to know that. What am I... But you're always trying. You're aiming in that direction. And with playing the euphonium, what I try and do, number one is to maintain the quality of the sound, no matter what I'm playing, no matter whether it deserves attack or very smooth playing. The quality of the sound is an even sound. Because the euphonium, as you probably know, is derived from some obscure Latin word meaning beautiful sounding. And every time I get that instrument out, that sound becomes special. It becomes part of me. And I try and put part of me into part of that. And my wife gets very jealous sometimes, because I spend a lot of time with this. And she's actually a violinist, so we sort of learn to cope with these things. But every now and then, we're sort of lying looking up at the stars, and she says, what are you thinking about? Second movement of that prefix. Just can't seem to get the alternative fingerings working. But, these sort of things, they go through your head all the time. You wake up with them. And I've described it. It sounds like an American term, but playing for me is a whole body experience. I get shot if I said that in the UK. They said you've been reading textbooks again. But for me, it demands every part of you. The brain, the fingers, the body, everything is geared to playing well. Okay. I remember when I was at school, I had a couple of friends who said, when it came to exam time, I'm going to go out tonight. It's no sweat. I got through last year's exams and never revised. And the reason why they're clever is not because they don't revise, is that they make you believe that they're not revising. And then when you say, okay, I won't do the same, and they go and revise, they prove to be the smart ones because they're better than you. And it's the same thing I've found with players. A lot of players that say, well, I've had a busy week, I haven't touched the instrument at all. Comes out clear as a bell. And I don't believe them. And the wise ones are the ones that don't make a big deal about practicing, but just do it and enjoy it. And there's a lot of talk I find, particularly in the UK. I mean, as I say, everyone here seems to be so friendly and open and honest. You can go around and talk about mouthpieces. But in England, if you said to a euphonium player, what mouthpiece do you play on? You'd say, mine. I guess that's the difference. It's really. Don't write that down. I'm watching. Anyway, I'm going to now play a piece that you may not know, originally written for trombone. But I think it makes a really good piece for the euphonium. It's the Unaccompanied Fantasy by Malcolm Arnold. He's written fantasies for trumpet, I think French horn, certainly tuba, and this one for trombone. It's in a three-part structure, first and last being lively. The opening is in 6/8, and the last one is quite a quick 2/4, with a gorgeous middle section. It's actually very difficult to play, as you will now hear. So, Malcolm Arnold, Fancy for Trombone. It's a bit hairy, but in terms of daily targets, this is the sort of thing that I try and make myself play every day. The third title, as I said, was entitled, Is Anybody There? Seems a strange title, but I think we need to reassess what we do and for whom. As I'm just reading my script here, just to get my breath back. While we enjoy our practice, I presume we do, and I've never met a good player that really hates practicing. You have to make practice interesting. We still got to consider who we are and who we're playing for, just as a composer does. In fact, the composer job primarily is to think, what do? I write music for people to listen to. I don't write music to write down to go in a book for nobody to hear. And some people might say that the actual writing down of music is not the composition anyway. By the time it comes out to the composer, it's already there. You cannot see sound. So, whether we like it or not, as performers, we are musical servants. Not a terribly nice thing to actually describe yourself as a servant. How about a musical stripper? Now, that sounds a pretty outlandish thing to say, but think carefully what we do as performers. We try and arouse an interest in the viewer with the tone that we produce. You try and create further interest as you play. You have an interplay with the audience. You can create expectations and either fulfill them or delay them or negate them completely. You can make the audience want more. That's why they come back. That's why certain artists are famous and they fill concert halls, because people want to hear that person play or sing. You can reveal very personal things about yourself as a performer. Your innermost thoughts, things that perhaps you couldn't even express in words, they can come out in what you play, and should come out in what you play. You try and make things clear for the audience. You should try and make things intelligible, certainly in terms of the music. Not necessarily in terms of the structure, but what has the composer written? And how has he really wanted it to sound? That's the exciting thing about working with Joseph Horowitz this week. It's a euphonium concerto that I've been playing for a good many years, but never really until about a year ago spoken to the composer about the piece. And to try and get a version as close to what went in his head when he composed it is actually very exciting. And the final thing on that subject of what our role is always leave just a tiny bit back. That's not a selfish thing, but always let the audience think that you have more to offer, even if you haven't. even if you've given absolutely everything, and that top note you could never ever get again in a million years. But let them have the feeling that there is more to be heard. So essentially what we're doing is conveying the thoughts of a composer to an audience with a view to getting something from it. There's a reaction that has to take place if it's to become more than just a social exercise of going to a concert, clapping, going home and saying, wasn't it wonderful? Wasn't what wonderful? Oh yes, the concert, that was okay. There's got to be more than that if we are to succeed and have a future. Particularly with an instrument like the euphonium or the tuba, we have to convey something about that, because it's not an instrument that you will walk into a concert hall and say, oh, we've got the Mozart piano concerto and we have this euphonium concerto, without people saying, what? A what? That is still there, unfortunately. And I would love to see in sort of 10 years' time, people go to a concert and say, what's on the programme tonight? Oh yes, euphonium concerto, lovely. It'll take a while. It'll take a while, but it's a dream I have. It's a dream I have. And the other thing we have to do, as I say, is display something of yourself, not in any sort of egotistical way, but as a means of communication. It's an outlet. Some people are writers, some are painters, musicians. Some people perhaps feel they don't have a need to express themselves. They become politicians. A slow piece that I've played for years, in fact it was the piece which I played on TV on the Best of Brass series, is the beautiful melody by Saint-Saëns entitled The Swan, and I'd like to play that for you now. that piece was originally written for cello. This almost sounds like an apology, doesn't it? Oh well, never mind. One day we'll have music like that. But will we? It's a question I often have to ask myself. Are we really just playing games with ourselves or with our friends? You know, hey, I play the euphonium, great, so do I. We're really going to go places. I'm convinced that the instrument has yet to come of age. Not in our eyes, of course, but in the eyes of, at the Academy, as they describe it, people upstairs. People who make decisions. Euphonium, repertoire's a bit dodgy. You see, I fell out with the Academy when I was about 16. They weren't bothered at the time. Because when I was filling in forms to further education, I wrote to the Royal Academy. At that stage, I certainly wasn't good enough to get in anyway, but I wrote to them and I had a reasonably nice letter back saying, Dear Mr. Mead, further to your application to study at the Royal Academy on euphonium, we do not recognise this instrument in terms of first study tuition. Do not recognise it. It's here, you stupid! So it took a while. In fact, it took about 8 years, but I got my own back because I teach it there now. But I went away and wrote theses and did all sort of scholarly things, but secretly harboured a desire that I would get my own back. I'm not a revengeful person, but I'm so pleased to be actually being able to train a new generation of euphonium players. Admittedly, most of them come in as trombonists, but I can convince a lot of them as to the merit of the euphonium. And they're now even admitting first study players. In fact, there's even a baritone player, a B-flat baritone. We don't have a problem with terminology, but we have a baritone student who's actually been accepted for October this coming year, which is very exciting. And that should, and I think will, stimulate the growth in repertoire as well. Communicating through hollow tubes. As I said, you probably gather by now, the instrument is special to me. It's an important part of my life. It's like communicating with this instrument. It's like looking at somebody that you haven't seen for a long time through a plate of double glazed windows, and you want to talk to them. You want to communicate, but there's sort of like a barrier there. This, sometimes, in terms of getting parts of ourselves across to people, I find that the tuba and the euphonium is a very powerful way of actually telling people how they feel about things, about life, about friendships. I mean, I actually find it quite easy to play here today because we're all interested in the same thing. I played for some people who just sit like that for 2 hours, and it's horrible. You know, and then you sort of get to the end and you play your encores and they go, you know, and you go off and think, was it worth it? But if there was just somebody there, even if they sat like that all the way through, if somebody goes out and says, I've heard a euphonium that I haven't heard before, then it's worth it. So this communicating thing is something that we have to do. Expression is a good word. I saw a Yamaha advert. I'm not going to talk commercials at all, and I don't represent Yamaha, but I saw a Yamaha commercial which just said in one big word, expression. I thought, what a good advert in a tuba magazine, because it says a lot. Expression. That's what we're doing. We're expressing ourselves. You may get the cynics to say, you play it because it's your job. But hopefully the players that do that will never think of it as a job. Anybody here play with any of the Washington bands? It's just a job. No way. You wouldn't admit it anyway, but I mean, that's excellent. That's excellent. Well, I'm now going to play some violin music. And this is really very difficult. It's Zigeunerweisen by Sarasate, originally written for violin. I've got a recording of it played on a trumpet, which is actually rather nice as well. But I did a recording of this just a little while ago for Euphonium and Brass Band. If you don't know it, I think you'll like it. The whole of the first section is like an extended recitative, cadenza, whatever you like. And then we go into sort of like a gypsy dance, which is actually very, very hard, but very enjoyable also. It's quite rewarding when you get to the end, particularly if you clap. So I'll try that now.